Hi guys, my name is Vanessa Smedley and I am a painter. Today we are going to attempt a traditional watercolor of this little stormy skied beach scene from St. Augustine, Florida. I took this photo myself a couple weeks ago, so we don't have any photo credit on that, but this is going to be a fun one. I tend to hear from beginners that they're a little bit intimidated by doing stormy skies because it involves dropping in a lot of really bold, dark colors. So it kind of scares them a little bit, but it's actually really fun. So let's do this. Okay, so today for materials, we have Baohong paper. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that because it's Chinese, but this is the artist's grade. They also have an academy grade, that's the student grade, but this is the artist's grade. It is 300 GSM, and that equals out to 140 pound, which is the same as I use most of the time. It's on a block, so it won't need stretching. I always pre-tape the edges though anyway. All of my brushes are the same brushes I normally use. I will list that stuff in the description, but this is a 6, an 8, a 12, and this is actually a 1/2 inch flat instead of a 3/4 inch flat. I have a hockey brush. Today for my watercolor palette, I'm using the Winsor and Newton professional grade. And then also at the end, we will throw in some Winsor and Newton designer gouache. This is white. White is the only color we'll use in this. My regular spray bottle. And then we're also throwing in for fun a lovely little Xacto knife for scraping off some highlights. So let's go. I have this pre-drawn and pre-taped, and I'm actually taping the horizon line so that it'll come out nice and crisp. I'm going to do this stormy sky wet on a wet, so I am pre-wetting the entire sky here. I'm now dropping in a mix of Paynes Grey and Ultramarine blue towards the bottom of the horizon line as a little bit of blue sky peeking through these storm clouds, and then I start dropping in various mixes of Paynes Grey. Paynes Grey alone on this sky. Paynes Grey always makes a great stormy cloud. For these storm clouds, you want to start out very light and then start dropping in darker consistency mixes of the Paynes Grey and just let it mix by itself. Don't scrub the brush back and forth. Don't fiddle with it too much because that kind of ruins the effect that you're trying to go for here. So just keep building it up darker and let it mix. You want to paint around the areas that you want to stay the lightest. I tend to use a 1-inch hockey brush on this because it turns out smoother and keeps you from fiddling too much. But here I'm coming back in with a number 12 round, and I'm starting to lift out some of the areas that I want to be a little bit lighter, and some of the areas that I want to blend, I use it to blend. Here I'm just continuing to darken up that Paynes Grey in order to get like a really dark stormy look. I can tell that the wash is starting to kind of dry out because it's not spreading and you can see more apparent brush strokes. So I actually take a second and spray with the spray bottle to keep the washes moving and mixing on the paper. Continue to lift out areas here and there with a damp brush in order to provide some highlights for some of these clouds. And then finally get this where I want it and then let it dry completely. Time to remove the tape. I still want this to be a very straight horizon, so I retape over the top half after it's dried completely. I mix Prussian Blue, Paynes Grey, and raw umber together to make a very kind of greenish, grayish ocean color. Here I'm dropping in that mix and I'm leaving white spaces for waves, and then I turn my brush on its side and use a kind of a dry mixture to dry brush this foamy area of the ocean. Then I come back in with a thicker consistency of the same mix, and then come back in with a little bit of indigo blue, and then I take the tape off of the horizon. Here I am mixing some burnt umber with a little bit of Paynes Grey and some yellow ochre, and then adding even more Paynes Grey to certain areas for some variation in tone for all of this sand. Here I wet the entire area that the sand is going to go so that I can drop it in wet on wet. And then I begin dropping in the various mixes into these different areas. In the areas where the sand is going to be wetter, closer to the water, we're going to make that darker, just as it would appear in nature. I cover my sky with a shop towel and do some splattering on the sand for some texture. You definitely want to do that because you don't want to ruin your sky with stray splatters. Then I wet that area closest to the water, and I'm going to start dropping in that darker brown color, and then also drop in the sea mixture, because you can see here that there's quite a bit of blue in that area. See what I did there? Here I'm mixing some Paynes Grey and some burnt umber to start working on the house. I've got my number 6 brush here for fine details, and I begin to paint wet on dry. A darker mix for the roof and a little bit lighter mix for the rest of the house, and I'm painting around the eaves and the frames of the windows to leave that detail for later. On details like the staircases and the farther off houses that you can barely see in the distance, I'm kind of fudging a bit of that in because you don't want to get too fussy with the details. I'm using a darker mix of Paynes Grey to put in the shadows and the window panes here. Time to work on the green items in the painting here, so I'm mixing some Sap Green with some yellow ochre, and then some Hooker's Green with some Ultramarine Blue and some Paynes Grey, and then I begin dropping it into the greenery here on the side of the house. I use the lighter color to work on the grass, and I use a little bit of dry brush technique because there's sand showing through here. I'm coming back in with my darker mixture of brown here, and I'm turning my brush on its side again and doing a dry brush technique to get this sandy, gritty texture here. Covering up my sky again with shop towel so that I can put some more splattering and texture into the sand. Using some Paynes Grey here to add some shadow underneath the roof line and just different areas of this house, and darkening up the window panes and things like that. Still using my number 6 brush here, and I am going back in and dropping in some darker areas into this greenery here. Then I take my 1/2 inch flat and I'm using clean water to lift out some lighter lines on the side of this house, so I'm going to use those as the trunks of the palm trees that I'm going to add here. Adding back in some more of that blue mixture to the foam here. And now I'm going back in and lifting out some more tree trunks here because I had decided earlier that the bushes were too wet to do this. I mean, you know, just a rookie mistake. And now I'm taking some yellow ochre and I am suggesting some palm trees here. They're so far away I'm not putting in much detail, but I'm just going to start with yellow ochre, and then I'm going to drop in some of the mixture that I made of Hooker's Green and Ultramarine Blue and Paynes Grey together. And I am adding some of that sand mixture on the shadow side of these trees for the trunk. Just adding in some more detail to this dune part of the sand here with the various mixes of brown. And I'm darkening some shadows again with Paynes Grey. Sometimes it takes me several rounds of adding Paynes Grey to get the shadows as dark as I want to. I'm not sure what that says about my personality, that I really like dark shadows. Just adding in a little bit of detail here on the beach. I mean, there's pretty much always some seaweed somewhere. Now for our trusty Xacto knife. You could also use a box cutter here, but what we're going to do is we're going to start scratching away the color lightly so that you don't scratch all the way through the paper or you don't cut your paper. But I'm going back in and making some waves here, and then I'm going to be like doing the same thing to all the white areas and highlights that I want to add back in. Be prepared for this to be pretty tedious. I mean, it takes quite a lot of time to actually get an effect with this kind of thing without ripping the paper. And I must add, it's not a particularly pleasant sound to have to listen to either. I decided to add a few tiny little highlights into the trees using the scratch method too, because they're so small. It would have been hard to paint them in. And if you get fed up with scratching your white details out, you can add white gouache like I decided to, because man, it was taking forever. Then I covered up my sky with a shop towel again and splattered in some white gouache for some splashing waves. I really like that effect. And here's the finished painting, all dried, tape removed, and signed. And there you have it. A nice, lovely, stormy, moody sky. See, I told you could do it. It's a cinch. Or, I mean, maybe not a cinch, but you can do it. It's fun. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. It really does help to get this channel out to more people, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.